Hello and welcome to my channel again. Today I wanted to show you my process behind watercolor sketching, and if you want to know how to make your watercolor sketches pop, keep watching. Some of you may know that I'm currently doing my Northern Line stations project, and for this project I decided to sketch paint all 52 stations on the Northern Line. And if you don't know, Northern Line is part of London Underground, and I am one of the train drivers on the Northern Line. This is my full-time job, and doing art and creating, drawing and painting, this is what I do in my spare time. Today I'm drawing Burnt Oak Station, and this is one of the stations on the Edgware branch of the Northern Line. Normally I never use pencil when I sketch. I normally just go straight in with my fountain pen, but for this project I decided to use the pencil because I want my sketches to have correct perspective, and I want everything to look nice, so I'm doing that extra step and I'm using a pencil to first sketch out the main shapes of the buildings that I'm drawing, and then I'm adding a little bit details, but not all of it. All the details I add is usually after with my fountain pen. Also, you might have noticed that I'm using one of those half gloves that you usually use on the drawing pad. The reason I use the glove is because I don't want any oils or grease from my hand, from my skin, to transfer onto the watercolor paper, because if the paper is oily or greasy, then the paint won't soak in and you will be left with like blank spaces. After my initial sketch, my pencil sketch is done, I go over the lines with my fountain pen. I'm using platinum carbon ink, and it is a permanent and waterproof ink. I wait for it to dry and then I rub out all my pencil lines. The reason I rub them out for this project is if you add water, sometimes the graphite can smudge and change the color of the paint that you apply. So this is the reason I remove all the pencil lines. After my ink is dry, then I start with first washes of watercolors. I usually add a lot of water to my paint and I just do the initial wash, and then I work on top of those, adding more and more paint into my water mix, or you can say less water into the paint, so my mixes become a little bit more saturated. And I go over everything and I just work layer by layer. You can see this on the roof that I'm painting now. My initial wash was not very saturated, and my next wash, this is when I started to add the texture of the roof tiles. Even though they might blend a little bit, it still looks like roof tiles. I do the same thing for walls. So if I'm doing brick walls, I'm not one of those people that will paint brick by brick or draw brick and another brick and another brick. I think it's so time consuming, and also I'm not doing a realistic illustration. It's more like a very loose sketch, loose illustration. So I never put that much detail into drawing every single brick. I add just little splotches of paint, and then your brain will do the rest. Your brain will just assume these are bricks and you will see bricks. This is one of the techniques to actually achieving that pop effect in your watercolor sketches. I see a lot of people just doing one wash And don't get me wrong, when I started watercolors, I did the same thing because I didn't know any better. I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was just drawing my picture and then doing a wash of paint. I made my washes quite saturated, and that was that, and I stopped right there. But as I was learning to paint and as I was practicing to paint, I've noticed that actually working in washes will make your sketches pop a little bit more. When you increase contrast in your sketch, this will make your sketch pop off the page. It will make it look a little bit more dimensional. As you can see, I started adding shadows to my drawing. For my shadows, I always use Payne's Grey. I know people use different mixes of different paints, but for me, I've always used Payne's Grey because it's got this blue tone, and I think shadows are generally not just black. Shadows will have that blue tone to them, blue or purple tone to them. So for this reason, I always used Payne's Grey. There might be a day when I change my color on, or I start mixing my different colors to make my shadow color, but for now I'm using Payne's Grey, and this color makes me happy. Adding shadows will increase contrast in your painting, and increasing contrast in your painting, it's one of the ways to make your sketches pop off the page, to make them more dimensional. What you have to remember if you are a new artist, or if you are new to watercolors, or even drawing anything, any kind of art, is dark pushes things back and light pushes things forward. And you can see it clearly here now what I'm doing. I started adding shadows and shading to the doors, and straight away you can see these doors are being pushed back, and that wall in between those two doors, it seems to be popping, it seems to be coming forward at you. So yes, this is another way of achieving nice contrast in your drawing and making your drawing pop. I'm still working in layers, as you just saw. I've added another layer of color to the window panes, and I'm adding some extra shading on the side of the building and just under the roof. When my painting is dry, I usually grab one of my fine liners and I start adding little details like those paving stones, and I'm drawing some lines for the bricks. All I'm working on is adding texture to my drawing. Another way of adding a little bit more contrast and pop to your drawing is drawing those little gaps in between the paving stones. What you can also do is grab a couple of Tombow brush pens or any pens that you have and deepen those shadows. I usually use a range from light grays to dark grays, and I go over my shadows and add a little bit more contrast. At the very end, I will grab one of my white gel pens and I will add little sparkles or little lines to the places that I want highlighted. I will also give you a bonus tip. If you've ever used washi tape on the watercolor paper, you might have an experience of ripping the paper off when you were taking your washi tape off. So what I usually do, I warm up my tape with the heat gun, and then voila, no issues and no rips. Here you see me using one of those plastic tools to take my sheet from the block. It goes through that glue really nicely and you don't get to rip your picture, which is a bonus. I really hope you enjoyed that video and that you find it helpful. If so, please don't forget to like and comment and subscribe, and I will see you in my next one. Take care. Bye bye.